Ladies and gentlemen, I'm introducing Tom of Upper Echelon Firearms. Thank you so much for coming on, Tom.
Steve, I appreciate you having me. Thanks so much.
The pleasure is all mine. I think that this is a really important conversation to have at a time where I think people are what's I'm looking for? They're getting desperate, I think. There's a lot of people out there desperate to kind of look for a solution to this issue that we seem to be having with these mass shootings. And one of the solutions, I mean, among many, is, gun confiscation. They're looking at guns, kind of how people are getting them. There's this whole issue, and what I find lacking in this conversation is the perspective of a seller like yourself, and I think it's so important to have that perspective. So that's, and I've talked on the phone with you about it, we agreed, and I just want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for giving this perspective that no one else is going to get really anywhere else. So before we begin, just tell us a little about yourself. I mean, how do you get into this kind of business?
Well, I think I got into this business it originally started with an enjoyment of firearms, for recreational shooting, sports shooting. And, I saw it as a way to supplement my income and do something that I really enjoy doing and love doing.
So you had a lot of people, like your friends and everything, everyone were, I mean, it's one thing to like guns, but to go through a process to then become a seller. That's got to be, you got to have a passion for that.
Well, sure, yeah, and I grew up around firearms and responsible firearm ownership with my family, friends, and extended friends. So I think it's a great community to be a part of as well. A lot of like-minded people, and I think it's a great community. But I'm also an entrepreneur too.
Nice.
So
like taking risks.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to do that, and I saw an opportunity there, and enjoying it every step of the way so far.
Awesome. In your opinion, because I had contacted a couple different local owners, and I was kind of surprised that they wouldn't even talk to me whatsoever. In your opinion, why do you think? What's the hesitation? Why do you think that is?
I can't really say for certain, Steve. I think there's probably a bit of a hesitation for some, just not to get involved in the politics of it all. Just to run their business and approach it from that standpoint. And I'm sure there's probably an assumption from some that whatever they say is going to fall on deaf ears anyway, because a lot of people's minds are made up with or without facts.
Or you're taken out of context, or
exactly right. Exactly right.
Interesting. So, on that note, actually, have you ever received any kind of backlash of harassment for being a gun seller ever?
Personally, I have not encountered it much. No. I mean, I'm not the type of person who walks around and says, "Hi, my name's Tom. I sell guns."
True.
And this isn't the only business that I have. So, I know enough to get a feel for who I'm around.
But isn't that weird that, you can't even, because, I mean, part of any business, I always tell people about the podcast, but it's you hold that back a little bit. And it's interesting how you have to hold that back a little bit, even though it's a business and you probably want to tell people, but because it's somewhat controversial inherently, that it changes how you would approach it usually, I think, which is interesting.
Yeah, you might be right on that. I wouldn't say I hide it. I just think in general, I don't walk around either and say, "Hi, I'm Tom, and my other business is XYZ" either.
Fair.
So I don't do it with either business, and that's just more my personality and my style and my approach to it.
Okay.
But should the conversation go in that direction or come up, I stand chest out, chin high, and proud, and about what I'm doing, and that it's the right thing to do.
Okay, awesome. So I want to be conservative with your time here, so let's get right to it. I'm going to start with, how do you become a seller? What's the process for becoming a seller?
Well, without going into great specifics, but basically you need to be approved by your local zoning board and your local police department, and then you have to get vetted and approved by the ATF. And that vetting process includes a 3+ hour in-person interview with an ATF agent, another submittal of fingerprints to the federal government. The federal government does an extensive background check. They then speak to the local authorities, the local police, the local zoning board, and make sure that everything is above board with the local municipality. And, plus the ATF, once you do get your license and you meet all their criteria, the ATF then does random inspections of the gun stores and of the shops. They thumb through all the inventory, all of our paperwork. And they have a very specific way that they want everything. So, it's very important that we have everything on point at all times. Cause
what are they looking for?
They have a certain criteria, the way they want all paperwork filed. Basically what it is, it's so that they want to be able to pinpoint any firearm that may have ever come through the business, and they want to be able to do it that quickly.
So your filing has to be
On point.
100% no flaw. Like, it has to be perfect. They go in
Correct.
there, I want this, I want it now. It should be right there where it should be.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And every firearm has a paper trail where, when it went in, when it went out, and then who it went to, and so on, all the way down through the line. Whoever dealer it went through, whoever personal hands it went through, everything's recorded.
Are there different types of licenses at all? Or it's just,
There
one-
are. There's certain licenses that allow you to actually manufacture weapons. There's some licenses just for people who like collect relic firearms, or they're curators. So there's a few different types of licenses out there.
So the one you have is just for selling, then? in this
Just for
case?
selling, correct? I'm not a manufacturer.
Okay. Interesting. So with that said, wow, that's quite an in-depth process. So it's not so much like I think from the consumer side, you at least in Connecticut, let's keep it to Connecticut.
Sure.
You have to have your permit, which means you had to go through this process. You had to get a background check. You had to go through an NRA course. You seem to have to go through quite more of a process to be a seller.
Right.
So you're
well,
not just some guy that says, I want to be a seller. And I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's a lot of money involved in this process too. I'm sure there's...
Oh, of course, there's costs. And of course, there's costs to purchasing inventory and like there are associated with any business. But, one thing I didn't mention is in Connecticut, in order to become a dealer, you do need to have your pistol permit first. So you have to go through that process first.
Interesting.
And then once you have your pistol permit, if you then wanted to go ahead and become a federal firearms licensee, you can then go through the process that I mentioned.
Wow. That's incredible. So, okay.
So it's multiple background checks, multiple submittal of fingerprints and so on.
It seems like how many, I feel like a background check is a background check. I mean, I know I've gone through a bunch of different processes for different kind of permits to carry across different states, and it's like, you're looking at the same record over and over and over, the same FBI criminal record, I assume. So
Right.
it's just interesting. I guess, is that a way they just kind of, you start the process, they just want to follow up and see what you've done since you started the process?
I would imagine so. Yeah, I would imagine so.
Interesting. Are there any misconceptions, any things that you would want the public, the consumer, to know from your perspective, something that they might have incorrect, something they might not have thought through from your perspective?
Well, that's an interesting question. Like I said, I personally haven't really encountered much flack or backlash for what I do for work. But I think in some circles there's a bit of a misconception, or almost, I think in some circles a gun dealer is almost looked at like a drug dealer, like there's blood on our hands for, putting a weapon out there and then some evil maniac commits a horrible atrocity with it, So, but that's not really the case. The truth of the matter is there's millions of law-abiding citizens in America who go through the vetting process to get a permit to carry guns, buy guns, carry guns. And those people, they really tend to stick to the law. Not only they have good morals and ethics, but they don't want to lose their permits. They don't want to lose their firearms. So I think if you take that mentality and multiply it by infinity, then you're talking about a gun dealer, because for most gun dealers, it is their full livelihood. So they're not going to jeopardize that by doing something incorrectly, or by violating a law, or by doing something that's going to, jeopardize them, their family, their livelihood. And, gun dealers typically are they're a group of people that preach and practice firearm safety, maybe more than any other group of people I've ever been around. And I think that's important to know.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think, I'm glad you said that, because as someone like me who's in kind of a media sphere, you see a lot of, I think you get to see the worst side of people at a place where, they're not looking at someone saying these things, but, I've seen the same things. I mean, merchants of death and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, I think it's in California now. They're looking at actually making sellers liable for whatever gun they sell to someone. If that person commits a crime with that gun, then the seller becomes responsible. And you've seen kind of other more Dick's Sporting Goods, you've seen Walmart. They don't accept responsibility, but when you take someone and they say, we're not selling this anymore, it kind of gives validity to that kind of idea that we're not going to be a part of the problem.
Right.
Meaning, as if they are the problem by selling weapons, and I just don't think that's the case. And I'm glad that you're, at least in your sphere, you're not encountering any of that stuff that, I would say the real hate that you see on like social media and stuff. It's good to know.
Right.
I think it goes to the point of social media that like people say things online they would never say that to your face and everything. It's just a weird concept.
There's a lot of keyboard warriors out there.
Yes, perfectly said.
Absolutely.
So you can get guns as a dealer. What about like accessories, like the suppressors, the magazines, the stocks, the barrel shrouds, and
Sure.
flash, all those things.
Sure. Well, first of all, having a dealer's license is not a permit to carry, so they're completely separate entities. So, as a gun dealer, if there's a particular firearm that a gun dealer wants to carry, say for personal defense purposes, meaning it's loaded, they're carrying it and it's loaded, it still needs that loaded firearm needs to be in accordance with state law, which in Connecticut is a magazine capacity of 10 rounds or less, and various other laws that are in place. So it's not just carry anything, go wherever you want with whatever you want. It's not the way it works. But in terms of accessories, first of all, suppressors are really regulated by the government as if they're a firearm.
Yeah.
So it's different from a typical accessory like a magazine, or which are in Connecticut restricted. So, or like a flash hider and things of those sorts. Those are just accessories, and those can be sold, most of them pretty much anywhere, but there are certain state-specific laws and local laws. So, like I just said, in Connecticut, there's a magazine restriction on the capacity. So, as a gun dealer, I cannot sell a magazine that has a capacity greater than 10 to anyone in the state of Connecticut. Otherwise, I would be in violation of law.
Well, what about like law enforcement? They're treated, are they a different like kind of class of...
They are, yes. So when I'm talking about civilian purchases,
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah, military and law enforcement members, they have there's a different set of rules for them.
So but I guess, so you can get anything basically. You could get extended magazines, you could get all those things, but you couldn't sell them to a civilian. You can only sell them to law enforcement or military.
Correct. If I sell them to civilians, I'd be in violation of law.
Gotcha. Okay. I just want to know if you could even get that stuff, like whether state law restricts you on what you can and can't get in terms of those things.
Gotcha. As a dealer, I can acquire them. Yes.
Okay. And yeah, man, blowing through these questions. How do you stay up to date with laws? Like when stuff changes, it's harder to find. Like if you try to Google like Connecticut general statutes, I find it's actually really like you can't. It's not just there. You need to.
Your head will spin.
Yeah.
As a dealer, we get I receive newsletters and updates from the ATF, but conveniently, anyone can. They offer the same to non-dealers. If you go to the ATF website, you could plug in your email address, and they'll send you out updates and newsletters and things of that sort. Pertinent information from ATF, which they govern not just firearms. They cover other things, but. So that's one way, but also, in Connecticut, Connecticut residents can go to the CT.gov website, go to the Special Licensing and Firearms section of the website. There's a whole bunch of information there. Connecticut residents can call that department to get a clarification or verification of a certain law. Absolutely. There's also a group called the Connecticut Citizens Defense League, the CCDL. Their website does update laws, and they have nice write-ups when laws change to allow citizens to be able to access that information. And I think their website's ccdl.us, so that's another great avenue people can get info.
Yeah, I originally came from New York, so I've been here for a few years, and you see the CCDL stickers on cars. And what is that? I know it's something.
Yeah, that's
interesting. Yeah. So for someone who's just like, let's say they don't know anything about firearms at all, they want to start, they want to get involved, they think they're cool, and they want to know the rules. That website is those websites, everything you just mentioned would be a good way to get like a base understanding, and even to get beyond with specific questions.
Yeah.
Going to the police and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. And then, of course, if someone takes their NRA training course to obtain their permit, there's a lot of questions are answered there, and a lot of laws are covered there. And a lot of the basic laws you need to know if you're going to carry a firearm on your person for defense or have it in your home for defense. So there's a lot of information in those classes as well, too.
Awesome. So what's the process for buying a firearm? What exactly, because this seems to be the most confusing thing to people. Some people say you can buy guns online. You can go to this gun shows. They have gun show loopholes. There's let's clarify this for everyone listening. Like, what is the process to buy a firearm?
Okay, let's talk about each way you just mentioned. So first, in person.
Sure, like brick and mortar stores.
Sure,
Example.
Steve, you come in, you want to buy a firearm. Well, I myself, and I think every dealer will require you to present your credentials first, whether it's your permit, your badge, whatever the situation might be, whatever your credentials are, and I'll just verify those, make sure that your permit's valid, that it's not expired, before I even let you handle the firearm, and even place it in your hand to feel it. And then from there, once a customer decides to purchase, they have to fill out a federal form, a state application, and then a state sale and transfer form. So there's 3 government forms that need to be filled out. On those forms, there's questions that need to be answered about criminal past. There's also a very important question if you as the buyer are going to be the actual transferee of the firearm, basically meaning that you're not buying it in your name for someone else. And answering that question dishonestly is a felony right off the bat. So once someone fills out that paperwork and I review it and I feel satisfied with the answers after reviewing them and okay, I can proceed. Nothing here looks like this person should be prohibited. I then need to, verify their credentials, make sure their addresses match, and that I have a clear understanding of that. And then from there, it's a call into the state police, and the state police runs a background check. And then if there's an approval and a proceed, we can then go ahead and complete the paperwork and transfer the firearm to that person.
Okay, so for everyone listening who might be skeptical, there's no way you could go into a brick and mortar store and what about a shotgun? Here's the thing, because I'm thinking that's for pistols and rifles, right? What about civilian? Just I guess pistols and what are like shotguns?
A pistol permit. So a pistol permit will allow you to purchase any of those types of firearms. If a person in Connecticut does not wish to ever purchase a pistol, but they want a hunting shotgun, they can go ahead and receive what's called a long gun eligibility certificate. So they again take a safety course, similar to the pistol permit class, but different in nature. I've personally never gone through the course, but and they receive a certificate which makes them eligible in the state's eyes to purchase long guns only. And there's a vetting process for that too, that the state does, similar to the pistol permit as well. So that would be the credential that I would have to submit to the state police when I call in for the background check, and then the background check will be run off of that.
Wow.
So still a background check.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and that's interesting. You said hunting rifle, like long guns. So obviously civilians in Connecticut, I don't think they can have like rifles, right? They can buy like an AR-15 or something.
A civilian Connecticut can buy an AR-15, but it has to be a pre-ban built AR-15. So it has to be built before 1994.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I can't imagine are there a lot of those around, or
no? So the price is quite high.
Yeah. I figured. But with shotguns, you specifically said hunting shotguns. So what if like
it could be a home defense shotgun? I just
just
use it as an example, just shotgun in general.
Well, the reason I asked is because aren't there like terms that like if the barrel's shorter, if it has a pistol grip, if it has a foregrip, if it has like like accessories again like that.
Right.
Does that then make the shotgun fall into a different category of weapon?
That's basically based on the length of the barrel. So if a shotgun is a barrel of 18.5 inches or longer, it's a regular shotgun. If the shotgun is a barrel shorter than that, it becomes a short barrel shotgun, and that's a different animal. That's regulated by the federal government. So
just the barrel.
The barrel length, right?
I recall there's a Supreme Court case on that, the Miller decision, if I remember correctly, and it's. So wow, just the barrel length. So it could be like if it's below 18. I don't know the rule, but like is there like 18 and above is fine?
18.5.
18.5. So if you have 18.5, is there like a window where it can be shorter than 18, but not anything below it? So that's the bare minimum. Oh, that's interesting. Cool. See, I'm learning stuff too.
Well, see, the laws like that, which as you sit there and laugh about it, those evolve over time.
Yeah.
When politicians, really, in response or in a way to think they're responding to something that happens, they write new legislation, they write new laws, and then they wind up becoming all these different little specifics that none of them really change much of anything, but they wrote a new law.
Well, that's why I laugh, because I see a lot of the same things happening today, where they it's this call to do something, And for me, it's like, well, we don't just want to do something. We want to do something that will actually have like an effect on what we're trying to deal with.
Right.
And I don't see. I mean, I'll have to review the Miller case, but from what I remember, it was a case that had to do with. Well, it ended up being about the length of that barrel of the shotgun, and I don't see how a shorter shotgun versus longer shotgun, in terms of its like damage, I don't see how it changes really. I mean, sure, you could say it's harder to carry around, but I don't think that was the point. I think people were saying like, somehow for people that aren't aware, a shorter barrel shotgun is somehow more deadly, or it's
Right.
like an assault shotgun. I'm getting ahead of myself now. But so that's brick and mortar store. What about like online? I mean, I know I can go to cheaperthandirt.com and they say, oh, we can ship, we'll
Yep.
get you whatever you want.
Yeah, actually,
It's fine.
the majority of our business is e-commerce. We ship firearms all over the country, but that is regulated. So it is against federal law to ship a firearm directly to a customer. So if a customer goes to our website, uefirearms.com, and they want to purchase a firearm, any firearm, they have to input the information of a local licensed gun dealer, local to them, that the firearm is to be shipped to. Our website will not even allow the transaction to proceed if a gun dealer's information is not entered in prior to the checkout portion of the transaction. Once all that information is entered, checkout occurs, we're notified of who the receiving dealer is. We then go ahead and contact that dealer. They send us a copy of their dealer's license. We verify the validity of their dealer's license with the ATF. And if that all checks out, we can then ship the firearm to that dealer. And then the customer that purchased the firearm has to go to that dealer, and they have to follow the in-person protocol that I just explained to you that we do with someone in person.
So the 3 forms and all of it.
And each state might have a different form here to there,
Sure,
but
sure. Just in Connecticut.
but yes, a background check needs to be called in, and then the firearm can be transferred legally from that dealer to that customer. So there's no Glocks in the mailbox. I can't just ship guns to people's houses. That's a fallacy, and it's not a real thing.
Because even if they were to do that, whoever the shipper is that person's going to jail or worse probably.
It's a federal crime.
Mhm.
Right.
Fair enough. Gun show loophole. You always hear about.
All right, listen, with laws, they're superseding law. So there are federal laws in place that I wrote a couple laws down,
Sure.
I had a feeling you would ask about gun shows because you hear it all over the news. So federal law prohibits transferring a firearm to anyone known or believed to be prohibited from possessing a firearm. So I think the question with gun shows is not when a licensed gun dealer is at the gun show selling guns, because that licensed gun dealer, as we already discussed, is going to cross every T, dot every I. They don't want to make any problems. The question comes into a private party selling to another private party at a gun show. So federal law also prohibits a non-licensee, which is just a private party, right, a non-dealer's license, from acquiring a handgun outside of his state of residence. So if a Connecticut pistol permit holder goes to any other state and wants to buy a handgun, they can't. It's against federal law. Even if they buy it they can't buy it from a dealer, and they can't buy it from a private party. There's already a federal law that prohibits that. So they can't go to a gun show and buy a handgun from a private party because they're from out of state. It's a federal violation. It also prohibits a non-licensee from acquiring a rifle or a shotgun from a private party outside of their state of residence as well too. And there's also a federal law that prohibits anyone from transferring a handgun to a non-licensee who resides in another state, and prohibits a non-licensee from transferring any firearm to a non-licensee who resides in another state. So, as those federal laws kind of almost double talk each other, but there's a reason for that. They overlap, and there is no gun show loophole because there's already federal laws preventing those transactions from occurring.
Yes, and I think it's important to point out that when you go to gun shows, like you said, I think it's mostly gun dealers there because they have, I think, the inventory that they want to sell.
Correct.
And I think the thing that people are talking about are like these person-to-person transfers. I'm sure there are scrupulous people out there, definitely, and I'm sure that some of them go, oh sure, hey, this is my own private stuff. Oh, whatever, I'll just sell it to you. I'm sure that happens. I'm not going to say, but that's far from a loophole. That's actually a crime.
Correct.
So that's it's not a loophole.
Right, committing murder is not a loophole,
Yes,
it's a crime.
exactly.
Right, selling drugs is not a loophole, it's a crime.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm curious, like, let's say I have a permit and I want to sell to you, and we both have, like, oh, I just want to see your permit, and we end up, I sell you a gun I have. Is that considered? Is that illegal?
No, that is legal, but there's certain steps you have to follow. So,
Do I have to do a background check?
absolutely yes.
Okay.
So
I
first,
would
so
have to pay for that.
both parties have to have a pistol permit,
Mhm.
and the state police would have to be called, and a background check would have to be run on the transferee, and an authorization number would be issued.
It's the same thing then.
Yes.
Same process.
Correct. And that's every firearms transfer in the state of Connecticut requires an authorization from the state police, which means a background check gets run. And we do that. And we do that too. Private party. A woman will want to transfer a firearm to her niece. They'll come here and I can do the paper. We help them with the paperwork, give them the forms. I can call in the state police, do the authorization for them, and so on and so forth. But every firearms transfer has to have an authorization number attached to it.
Okay. What about there are instances I hear a permit owner will have like a pistol, and a family member is going through something where whatever, she's afraid for her life or something, and the guy lends her his gun temporarily for like this one thing that she's doing, going back between work and home, both in the same state. One has a permit, one doesn't. Is that something that can happen in Connecticut?
No, you cannot possess a pistol
If you
without the
don't-
permit.
without the
No,
permit
so if she got
whatsoever.
caught with the permit, she's a felon.
Gotcha.
She'd get arrested and go to jail.
Okay.
And so with the person who lent it, now it is allowed to lend someone a firearm if all right, Steve, you have a permit. If you have a permit and I have a permit, and you want to try out a new handgun that I have, and you want to go to the range, and I know you, and I know you're a good guy, and I can let you borrow the gun and go shoot at the range. But of course, if a husband lets his wife borrow a handgun to carry on her person to go to the grocery store, and heaven forbid, she has to use that firearm in a defensive shooting, or even worse, a malicious act. Well, both parties are going to be responsible, because the firearm is legally his. So there would be a lot of repercussions for both parties. So, it's not the Wild West.
Moving on, punishments. What are we talk about this is a crime, this is a crime. What are the actual punishments that you look at for not having the paperwork filled out correctly, maybe not even having it at all for whatever reason? Maybe it got
For
lost?
dealers?
Yeah, for a seller.
For a seller, I mean, it depends on the error, of course. I mean, if it's something really small, like one file's chronologically, right behind the wrong one, it'd be a write-up. It would stay on record, that I made an error.
Write-up?
Oh, of course, yeah, I'd get, right. So there
Sounds
would,
like you're in middle school.
yeah, it would be noted that there was a mistake made. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and the ATF would know.
To be fair, yeah, I guess that's probably what they should do.
Absolutely. Now, if it's something major,
Like you just don't have the guy's address or something.
yeah, my license can be revoked, heavily fined. I can go to federal prison. It depends on what the error is. So, I think I speak on behalf of all dealers. We don't want to make any mistakes.
I was just, wondering because I know it's I just feel like it's such an intensely, what's I'm looking for? There's just so much scrutiny with what you guys are doing that, like, if you, maybe had the wrong, zip code or something, everything was fine, but, it was, 5 instead of 2-4 or something, and you misdid that, would they be like, oh, would it be like, hey, we're going to write this up, no big deal? Or would it be a big deal, for little things like that, where they still can find what they want, but you technically made a mistake?
Well, let me just say I knock on wood, don't have any write-ups. So
Okay.
that's. But yeah, again, I think it depends on the error and the circumstance and the situation, and what, if anything, had happened with that customer in particular, or what have you, or. So
it all depends.
It depends.
It all depends. What does the term assault rifle or assault weapon mean to you as a seller?
To me, an assault rifle is a rifle capable of select fire. Select fire meaning it has the capability of shooting semi-automatic and fully automatic. That's an assault rifle.
Is that a legal definition for you guys? Is that how you operate, and what
That's
guns
what
you can and
that's
can't
what
buy?
that's what an assault rifle is.
Oh, interesting. I guess this isn't also. I'm thinking of for Connecticut. I'm kind of thinking, you hear that it's it could be a barrel it could be that it has a pistol grip, it could be but in Connecticut it is whether it can shoot fully automatic or semi-automatic.
If it can do both, right?
Oh, if it can do both, not one or the other.
Not one or the other. Right. If it's fully automatic only, it's classified as a machine gun.
Yeah.
Which has special licensing and annual registration with the federal government and things of that sort. And so that's a machine gun. An assault rifle would be a rifle capable of semi-auto or select fire to full auto.
Does what is it, 3-shot or 6-shot burst?
Or burst, yeah. Some have a
also
burst.
fall into the...
That would be under select fire, right? You can go semi-auto, burst, full auto. Correct.
Okay. So when you see the conversation yourself, when you're watching TV or you hear people talking about it, what are your thoughts? What do you make of the conversation, generally speaking?
I think the vast majority of the public doesn't really have a full idea of what they're speaking about when it comes to firearms. I think there's a lot of people in the public, mainly gun control advocates, who couldn't tell you the difference between a semi-auto, a select fire, a full auto.
Like basic terminologies.
Right. So they really don't even know the different classifications of firearms and really what they're talking about. I guess if it looks mean, it must be bad, I guess, which is where a lot of the accessories get pulled into these laws, and the accessory is nothing more than that. The accessory, many of them are for aesthetics or, for certain things. So, I don't really like the current public conversation about it. Realistically, there's exponentially more lives saved every year by law-abiding citizens with firearms than there are lives taken by people who commit, crimes with firearms. But that doesn't really ever get spoken about publicly.
Certainly not on the... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Certainly not in the mainstream news outlets, yes. Right? So, that I think that bothers me. I think it bothers me quite a bit. There's millions of law-abiding citizens out there. If a psycho uses an AR-15 to commit a horrible atrocity, that I don't think that should mean no one should be allowed to own an AR-15. I also don't think that if someone decides to drink a bunch of alcohol and get behind the wheel and kills a handful of people, I don't think that means that no one should be allowed to drive cars anymore. Mm-hmm. So, it's a lot of it's a nonsensical reaction to to tragedy, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. I agree entirely. What are your thoughts on the Second Amendment generally?
At the core of it, the Second Amendment is about protecting the people's rights to self-preservation. That's what the Second Amendment is all about. When it was written by a group of people who had just fought for their independence from a tyrannical government, and they wanted to protect the rights of Americans to defend themselves from that if it ever comes up again in the future. And encompassing that is not just they're protecting their right to self-preservation from a tyrannical government, but also from domestic threat too. Mm-hmm. Home invader, attempted rapist, whatever it might be. So
yeah, what's interesting about this, on a quick side note, I was doing some research actually the last couple of days to kind of do a podcast on the Second Amendment and kind of specifically some of the opposition to it. So I went to the dissenting opinion of Justice, it was then Justice, I think he's retired now, John Paul Stevens, in his dissent in the Heller decision. Mm-hmm. And I read the entire thing, and wow, what a different view that he has of what the Second Amendment is. It's entirely different from what you would think. And it's scary, because when you think about it, they're one vote away from that dissent being the majority opinion. And at least for the court's purposes, that would be the interpretation across the nation. It was things like the idea that the only right you have in terms of what the right of the Second Amendment grants is a state's right to have a militia, and that the only proper or legal use of a firearm is only when in service in that militia for the services of the state. So it's all state central. The state can tell you if you can even have the gun. The state can tell you you can only use the gun in service to the state what the state tells you to do with it. It's incredible. And then he goes on to cite guys like George Mason and Edmund Randolph and Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, and he's citing these guys, and they're it's almost like Madison is speaking to you through the evil energy. And it's just I warned you about guys like this. He's saying, literally one of them is, we were terrified of a Congress getting too much power to disarm the populace, to disarm the militia, disarm the people. And then in the next sentence he's saying there's no way the founders would ever consider limiting the powers of Congress to regulate firearms. And you read those two sentences back to back, And I'm just like, did anyone proofread
Makes you
this?
scratch your head.
It's a wild concept that.
It's a scary concept.
I mean, it is terrifying. Really, to the brass tacks of it, it's horrifying.
It's horrifying, you know. And once parts of the Bill of Rights begin to get drastically amended and the interpretations change so drastically like that, I mean, it's a scary time,
Yeah.
because that's going to leave the door open for all the other amendments.
Oh yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
you hear the adage all the time. You know, you give up your Second Amendment, you're going to lose your First Amendment, and so on and so forth. You know, so you know, and I think a lot of people they look at other countries that did nationwide gun bans and gun buybacks and confiscations. You know, but what never gets mentioned is those same countries also do not have absolute freedom of speech. And people can be punished by law, by the government, for saying the wrong thing, and that's not the case here. And then you hear other sides of it say, well, the Second Amendment wasn't intended for AR-15s or assault rifles or suppressors, and you know, it 100% was. You know, at the time it was written, there was the same weapons were being used by the military as were being used by the people. You know, so the same people that argue the Second Amendment then wasn't written for weapons of today, and that the founders couldn't predict the weapons of today. Well, I tell you what, they couldn't predict Twitter.
Yeah,
So
you don't see the same arguments applied to the First Amendment.
Right, the First Amendment need to be adjusted because they didn't have the the foresight to see YouTube and the internet and so on. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. So it's a scary notion.
And it's interesting also, you know, they couldn't conceive of these powerful weapons, and it's like there was this thing called the puckle gun from like 1716, almost 70 years before the Constitution was even drafted. This basically automatic weapon. There was another one. I think Congress commissioned the manufacturing of like 100 of these things called the Belton flintlock, which was basically a semi-automatic 20-round magazine rifle. So I mean, there are other examples too. There's one called like the Pepperbox revolver. I think I don't even know what that is, but it was on a list.
You did some homework.
Well, yeah, I mean, the puckle gun I learned about a long time ago, and then all these other ones started coming up. I think some say the Belton flintlock doesn't exist. I mean, I've seen pictures of it,
Right.
But you know, they could be fake. I don't know if I'm being honest. But the puckle gun, there's no dispute about that. But it's like, no, they definitely knew about these things. They were just probably super expensive, and they couldn't like manufacture a lot of
Sure.
them for like an army.
Sure.
But I mean, it's just, and even if that was the case, it doesn't, like you said, it still would apply. I mean, it's just, you have this Bill of Rights. And according to at least this one justice, and probably to a lot of legal scholars on the left, they would suggest to you that, you know, the Bill of Rights is this bill that tells people what Congress can't do. It's a Bill of Rights, so it's not like a grant of power to Congress. But somehow they think the Second Amendment was this magical grant of power to the government to do stuff. It doesn't make sense.
It makes no sense.
I mean, really what they're doing is they have an objective. They want to get rid of guns. I don't know why. You know, we could give them the benefit of the doubt and just say they actually want to do something good with it. But it's not the way this is going to work. It can't work like that. If you can just reinterpret history like that, then what's going to, like, if the law of yesterday doesn't mean the same thing it did yesterday as it does today, what binds me to what you're going to say today and have it apply tomorrow?
Right.
I mean, it's the breakdown of the civil society as far
Correct.
as I'm concerned. A little bit over. I want to get one final question from you. What is your opinion? Well, how do you think we could stop some of these mass shootings from your perspective, if you even have one? I mean, I don't have a good answer.
I don't think I have an answer. I mean, I think we need to start with, let's start with, I think both sides of the coin, and when I say both sides, I'm referring to, pro-gun versus, anti-gun or pro-gun control, I guess I should say. I think, both sides want the same end result, and that is less or no more acts of evil. I think, the argument comes in the how. And, I don't know if I know the answer of exactly how to do it, but I think, one thing I do really believe is that more gun laws and more gun control will not be the answer. I heard a statistic, and I don't know if it's inflated. It seems realistic, but I've heard a statistic. There's over 20,000 gun laws currently written in legislation in the United States. If you combine federal laws and the different laws with each 50 state, that's over 20,000 laws already written. I don't think there's a magic number of how many laws we need to have, then all of a sudden this stuff will magically stop. 22,000, is it 24,000? I don't think that's the answer. I think when you look at some of the most violent areas in our country, they are often the most they're often areas that are the most heavily restricted in terms of gun regulation. You look at areas like Chicago, where the gun laws are so incredibly restrictive, and yet the violence there is rampant, and it doesn't get talked about. It doesn't get talked about because it doesn't fit the agendas, which is unfortunate. So I really respect and like what you're doing, Stephen. Listened to the podcast before you came in, and I like the objective view, and I like the common sense of it all. And let's be realistic. Would it be a perfect world or a better place if a magic magnet was invented and sucked every gun off the planet? I don't know. There definitely wouldn't be any shootings, but that's not real. That's not a real thing. We live in real life, and there's real problems, and there's evil people, and I don't think telling honest people and good people that they can't protect themselves is a way to stop crime. I really don't.
I agree 100% with everything you said. And for me, I've said it before, is that I don't see how you can legislate human evil out of people. And I think that's the source of it. For me, if you were to ask me, that's the source of it. How you get rid of that? I don't have an answer for you. I don't know how you can get rid of it, and I don't think you can. And that's the scariest thing about it, is I don't think there's an answer to stuff like that. I think it's just, no matter what you put in place, people can slip through the cracks. Nothing is going to be perfect, no matter what law, no matter what process or institution we have. It's it's sad to say, it's scary to say. Does that mean we do nothing? No, but I think that if you're going to do, at least right now, my position is protect what we know is valuable. Protect schools. If people don't, I'm sorry, we have to do it. I don't know what better solution do you have right now while we're discussing it, while we're coming up with better ideas. Let's protect what's valuable. It's our schools, our kids, places of interest, places that are getting attacked. Let's secure them somehow.
I couldn't agree with you more. My property taxes, they don't go down. They keep going up. So if that's the case, I'm fine with it. If they want to put metal detectors in my kids' schools, so be it. I'm fine with that. So I agree with you. More resources towards keeping our kids safe, our schools safe. I don't think any taxpayer would be against that. But I think you're right. I don't think there's a law or legislation to write evil out of people. It's not possible.
And like you said, you get rid of the guns, and then what happens? That human evil doesn't just go away. Now you're going to see. We already see it today. If we look at if we're honest about the stats, people are always talking about them, but they're worth bringing up again. It's just that more people are dying by other things. Hammers, fists. Than guns are, especially rifles.
Right.
Pistols actually end up, I think, cause the most harm, the most death incidents in the country, because they're the most, probably because they're more concealable.
In terms of firearms?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
More people are dying by other acts of violence or other tools, not even things designed for weapons, but their use of them. And I think that's the condition that we keep talking about, just the human condition, that you have this evil element to it, and there's nothing you can do about it. You take away everything, and if there's a rock somewhere, that's my new weapon.
Right.
It's just
evil is going to commit evil, but where that's a slippery slope is, lawmakers have the same thought as us. What do we do? What can we do? What needs to be done? So they start to write more legislation, and that gets very dangerous to the people. You hear a lot of talk here about red flag laws. That's extremely dangerous. Now you're giving a government the power to make a decision based on a quote unquote red flag, whether someone should be allowed or not allowed to own a weapon to protect themselves and to keep their family safe. And too much power to the government is a very, very dangerous thing.
And for me, I'm looking at it like the long term. So where we can look at a law that they pass, and whether let's say it's even let's say they do a red flag law and it's actually good, it actually works out and ends up saving lives and stuff. What I look at is, now you've just set the precedent that, government can regulate firearms now, and that precedent today may work for us, but now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, which isn't that far in terms of human history, they'll say, you let us do this back then, so now we can do this today. And then years from now, well, we did these two things back then, we can do this today.
Correct.
It's that in itself is another slippery slope, where when you set the precedent, it's going to be pushed farther and pushed farther, and at some point you just have to say no. This is, I'm sorry, you can't. I'm trying to think I can't remember which founding father it was. It was probably like Patrick Henry or someone, but he said, I'll take the consequences of liberty, whatever they are. And I agree with that like liberty is not perfect.
Right.
I think that it does have consequences to it. And not that I'm saying like I'm okay with this stuff, because I'm not, but at the same time there's no real solution to it. I mean, if someone has a solution, I'm open to it. Like I'm open to ideas always, and we can always talk about them, but the ideas that are presented today, right now, I don't think are sufficient whatsoever.
I agree.
And as far as I'm concerned, I don't want any of them right now.
I agree.
And, that's...
Well, I think if you look back at history, at tyrannical leaders of the past and of the history worldwide, many of their runs into power began with things like red flag laws and all the things that our government is currently discussing implementing or imposing upon the people. I think it's probably a better word. These are things that were done, and I think we need to learn from history. And you're right, it's not about today's leaders or the next 10 years, but we don't know who's going to be in power in 50 years, in 100 years. When our grandkids or great grandkids are still walking around, we don't know who that's going to be. And I think part of our duty is to shape a good life for them too. And a government overstepping its bounds is extremely dangerous.
Yeah, I know. My first thought is not too long ago, about 100 years ago, I think the Pitchfork Rebellion. As you can imagine, in Russia, it was a slaughter. It was a horrible, terrible slaughter. And and I'm not going to say it could happen here. I'm not going to say it couldn't happen here because did Rome think it was going to fall? Look at any empire.
Right.
Did they think they were the British Empire? Any of these guys think they were gonna not be on top forever? Why do we think we're any different?
Right.
We're not. We're flesh and bone, just like they were.
That's right.
The only difference is right now, anyway, we're young and we still kind of have a connection to those ideas. But that's it. Like the adherence to those principles and the ideas of government, and just learning from history and not succumbing to some of these feel-good kind of legislation that sets the precedent, that sets us down that slope. It's tough. I think it might be too demanding for a country over long term, but at least for now, like, we got to put a stand now. I think we got to say, listen, there are things we can do now to help secure things, but that's the best we can do. Is just keep securing people, keep being aware of our surroundings, and it's and people would say that's kind of a dark way to look at the world, but we're kind of living in a fantasy in America where the real world is everywhere else in the world.
Right.
But we got to keep in mind that we can't be soft all the time. We have to maintain some of that hardness. And not even, I would say it's like being situational aware, like always being alerted for threats, but just being personally responsible. Basically, it's a matter of responsibility. You have a responsibility to take care of your community, yourself, your family.
Those ideals aren't as common as they used to be. I feel.
I agree.
And that's problematic as well.
Well, hopefully with things like the podcast and we can talking about them and people thinking about them and dwelling on them and instilling those into your children, to the next generation. Maybe we can do our part to preserve what we can.
Absolutely.
Well, Tom, final thoughts on the conversation and anything.
No, it was great to sit down with you. I appreciate your time and opening the mic. And I think it's an important conversation and topic that you're putting out there, and I think it's interesting. You never hear, when you approach me, I thought about it a lot, and you're right, it's not a side of the story that you ever hear, and I hope a lot of people hear it.
A lot of people were super excited when I was telling them about it,
Good.
so I think this will be a fun one.
Good.
Awesome. Tom, thank you so much.
Steve, it's been a pleasure. Glad to be a part of it. Thanks so much.
We'll have you on again.
Sounds great. Appreciate it.
Till next time.